The Texas Chain Saw Massacre. After you stop screaming, you'll start talking about it.
Welcome to the Real Buffs Podcast. I'm your host, Charlie.
And I am Matt.
AKA Leatherface himself.
You know, I was actually going to say that. Believe it or not, in my head, I was going to say Matt, AKA Leatherface. But I was like, nah, gets a little weird and creepy. I don't want to be Leatherface. Maybe I'll be the old grandpa who's sucking fingers. Maybe.
Yeah, I mean, that's more your vibe. I was also going to say maybe Leather Daddy for you. That's also always been your vibe.
I am a big leather daddy, actually.
Awesome, man. So we are doing the 1974 horror film. I'd say like it's slasher, almost proto slasher. It's kind of before the slasher, and we can talk about that later. But the Texas Chain Saw Massacre, obviously directed by the great Tobe Hooper, written by Tobe Hooper and Kim Henkel. Cast is including Marilyn Burns, Alan Danziger, Paul A. Partain, William Vale, Terry McMinn, and the great Gunnar Hansen as Leatherface himself. This is one of my favorite horror films of all time. And obviously part of the reason why we're doing this movie is that it's celebrating its 50th anniversary coming up this year. Actually, it just passed its 50th anniversary because the film was released October 1st of 1974. So, happy 50th birthday to this movie. And our first movie of spooky season too. So yeah, man. You know what? House cleaning item. Before we get into spooky season and stuff, you guys may be wondering, weren't we going to do the 1995 Oscars series? Yes, we are, but it's spooky season, and spooky season takes precedent. So we'll be revisiting that come November, but we wanted to make sure that we just went all horror for October, and so that's why we got this one coming up now.
We did. Yes. Also, you say the proto to the like slasher. I would agree, but also I almost feel like this is like the proto to like Eli Roth, Hostel, almost torture type flicks, because slashers I think are almost a little, not like goofy, but very different. Whereas this movie, for being a 1974 film, gets really hard to watch in certain areas. Like I'm revisiting it because it had been a while. This is probably one of the more unsettling films for a quote unquote classic style horror film, which you don't really see a lot of when you get, Michael, Ghostface, Friday the 13th. The only thing that's unsettling is getting killed by an 80-something-year-old lady, which is Jason's mom, letting her punk you. But
whoa, spoilers, bro.
You're right. If you haven't seen it, man, I don't know what you're doing. But yeah, I guess that this movie's more of like, it's really unsettling, especially for a 1970s flick, which we'll dive into. So maybe I'm getting ahead of myself.
Yeah, I mean, it is. It's definitely one of the more unsettling ones. And, that's got sort of the perfect word to encapsulate it. Like, it really is just, it puts you at unease right away. And there's certain things that they're doing in this movie that really contribute to that. And we'll talk about like some of the methods that they do. It's a lot with the camera work for sure. But it's just part of it's like the low budget aspect of it too. It's an exploitation film. The heart of this film is really an exploitation film. Like it's got that catchy genre, like the Texas Chain Saw Massacre. And it feels like, oh my God, I'm about to watch a snuff film. And then you watch it and it's not really that much gore. Like it's not really, when you take a step back and look at it. And certainly there is, but it's not like you're looking at people getting hacked up by chainsaws. It's really like a lot of the audience filling in and using their imagination with it. So, but anyways, yeah, before we get into that, let's get into the ChatGPT summary. So the Texas Chain Saw Massacre is a landmark horror film directed by Tobe Hooper. It follows 5 young friends, Sally, her paraplegic brother, Franklin. My Franklin's sitting right next to me too. He's not named after this Franklin.
He's not paraplegic.
No, he's not yet. He's not like that dog from Family Guy too, with from
yeah.
What's his name? Jesse. Anyways, it follows around them and their friends Pam, Jerry, and Kirk as they embark on a road trip to rural Texas to visit an old family homestead. Along the way, they encounter a hitchhiker who acts bizarrely and harms himself before they manage to kick him out of their van. Shaken by the encounter, they continue on their way. Upon arriving at the homestead, the group splits up to explore, and two of the friends, Kirk and Pam, stumble upon a nearby farmhouse. What they find inside is terrifying. The house is occupied by a family of deranged, cannibalistic killers, most notably a hulking figure known as Leatherface, who wields a chainsaw and wears a mask made of human skin. One by one, the group falls victim to the family in increasingly horrific ways. Sally eventually becomes the sole survivor, and she is subjected to a terrifying ordeal as the family captures her and brings her to their home for a macabre dinner. In one of the most infamous scenes in the film, Sally is forced to witness the grotesque behavior of the family, including an attempt by their elderly near-dead patriarch to kill her with a hammer. She narrowly escapes and, in the final act of desperation, flees into the morning light. Leatherface chases her down the road with the chainsaw, but Sally manages to escape and flag down a passing truck, laughing hysterically in relief and terror as Leatherface swings his chainsaw in frustration. Film ends ambiguously with Leatherface continuing his menacing chainsaw dance in the middle of the road, leaving the audience to grapple with the disturbing world they've just witnessed. Yeah, fucking a disturbing world you just witnessed. The Texas Chain Saw Massacre is renowned for its grim atmosphere, minimal use of explicit gore, like we just said, despite its reputation, and pioneering portrayal of the slasher genre. It explores themes of isolation, madness, fragility of civilization, set against the backdrop of decaying rural America. The film's raw documentary style gives it an unsettling realism, making it one of the most influential horror films in cinema history. 100%, it's one of the most influential horror films in cinema history. Matt, what is your relationship like with this film?
First off, I just want to point out about the fact that she is laughing hysterically on that truck was actually her legitimately laughing because she was so delirious from filming that's her real laugh. That was it. That was the final scene. And so there's a lot to die production wise, man. I can't wait to kind of discuss about the notes just for the fact that like, there's a lot of production behind the scenes things, but my relationship, man, I don't honestly remember the first time I watched this film. It might've been around the time that I watched the Jessica Biel Texas Chain Saw Massacre. Cause you know, I was like 13, it was 2003 or something. Jessica Biel was like, whoo, baby. But I was like, oh shoot, this is a remake. I guess I didn't really know because I know they made a couple of them early on. And so I went and somehow got a hold of this, maybe at a Blockbuster, perhaps. Maybe I had my parents rent it one night or something. And I was like, dang, it was legitimately like a pretty creepy. It's unsettling, I guess, is the easiest way, because you're right. They do a lot of like cutaways. They don't outright show anybody getting gutted. There's no blood spewing like you would see in other slasher films. There's no outright like meat grinding scenes. I know there's a couple sequences like when Kirk is getting killed with a chainsaw production wise. Like I guess he was spooked because at one point they held the chainsaw 3 inches from his face and so it's stuff like that, I guess, is what makes it even more kind of creepy to me as I dove into the film and hearing more about it. But it's one of the go-tos. I actually prefer this. This is one of the few ones I should say that I prefer over any remake, just because I feel like it's such a really unsettling film, more so than any of the other ones that have come out. I know Netflix did one, a couple years ago. That was just pure killing action in the middle of nowhere, Texas town, that I enjoyed for the fact that it was just pure killing action, but it wasn't moving the needle. Whereas I think this movie legitimately moved the needle in horror and really set the tone for future horror films.
Oh yeah. Without this, there isn't a Halloween or anything like that. I mean, this is, like I said, it's kind of like it's on the verge of a slasher film, but like Halloween sort of like is really what captures a slasher film. It has all the elements of it. And really, I guess you'd say Friday the 13th is what makes a slasher because it reinforces the tropes of the genre. But yeah, I agree. It's one of those movies that just sits with you after you watch it and you're like, holy shit, this is so raw and so unnerving. And, you know, that like they talk about that documentary style that it has, like that's what really interests me, how they shot it, because it really is like it with such a low budget and what their constraints were from a production standpoint, a budget standpoint. forced them to do that sort of filming style, and it makes it so much creepier. And yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Well, I was just going to say, like, oh, you speak of the documentary. One of the reasons why they put that based on a true story in there, I guess, is the fact that they wanted to tie it into then modern day news. Like the news had like this, grim stuff to it in the way they did like Watergate and things like that. They put like their own based on a true story to kind of political commentary it, which is, I find really interesting with a horror film, like adding some political commentary into a movie that doesn't have anything to do with politics. I think that also adds like that it's like, the more you find out about this movie, the more it kind of like sinks its claws into you a little bit.
It's very subtle what it's trying to say, but it's there. There's some stuff that this movie has to say. And like, we have some points in our discussion where I want to even talk about some of like the academic research on this movie, because there is a good amount of themes on this that are there in the text, and you just got to pick up on it, and it's worth exploring. And yeah, it's definitely worth talking about. So it's an exploitation film, but like nonetheless, it's got a little bit more meat on the bone, pardon the pun.
Yeah.
There. Maybe a little bit more meat in the sausage, if you catch my drift. Anyways, so my relationship with this movie, similar to you, the first experience I had with it was with the 2003 film. So I saw that in theaters. Yeah, Jessica Biel, obviously. I remember seeing it in theaters with a friend, and one of the things was that that basically like we were creeped out by it, and I remember thinking like, oh man, like I wonder what the original one was like. I didn't end up seeing this one, the 1974 version, probably way later than I'd like to admit. I would say I saw it in truth for the first time like in my late 20s, dude.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I tried thinking about it. I'm like, I can't place the first time I saw this. So I thought about when I really got into it, which was sort of in my late 20s during undergrad, during my independent cinema class. And like this wasn't one that we talked about in class, but it was one that I wanted to talk about because it is an independent movie and I'm a horror fan, and Halloween has been done to death, or I've done Halloween to death. So I was like, let's just do something different. And my teacher recommended this one. So I was like, all right, cool. I took a look at it and actually, wrote a big dossier about this film anyway. So yeah, that was it for me. And it's sort of been like a love affair with it ever since, because it's so raw. It's so unnerving. It makes it feel real. And I love it. Like it's become one of my favorite horror films, even despite like, I'm telling you this right now. Is it a perfect film? Absolutely not. But it has its shortcomings. And certainly I would say the lack of a big budget is what's making this movie great, but also what hinders it from being like great. You know what I mean?
Right.
So I love this film though. But yeah, man, that's my history with it. So let's dive into the production notes, man, because there's a lot to talk about. A lot of my research for this came from a book called Real Terror by David Cano. And look at this, Matt. We just talked about cloud storage. Thank God for cloud storage, because you know what I did? I went back and I have my undergrad papers that I did on this, and I already had my research, and I'm like, oh, I just got to go back in here and look some of this stuff up. And there it was. So already prepped for the pod.
Look at that. Look, thank you past us,
Yeah, not knowing that we'd be setting this up years in advance. So all right. So when we look at like the inspiration of this, according to director Toby Hooper, the inspiration for the movie came from when he was stuck at a department store around Christmas time in 1972, and he was tired. He was frustrated with like all the people around. And when he saw a rack of chainsaws, he thought it would be a good idea to just cut through people, or at least, grab one and like have them maybe get out of the way. He was just so frustrated, which I think we all can relate to for
If you
those of us.
haven't been there at some point, come on, you're lying to yourself.
Yes, I agree. You know, but obviously, Mr. Hooper deals with his emotions in a healthy way and writes a movie about his frustration. But there's some contention between this Tobe Hooper's inspiration for this and then the casting art director Bob Burns. He's kind of scoffs the idea. He says that Hooper probably got the idea from the ending of Last House on the Left when they used a chainsaw. So little bit, you know, a little bit differing opinions on how they came to that. I'm probably more inclined to believe Bob Burns on this than Tobe Hooper. But you know, we I guess we'll never know. All I know is that Hooper and Kim Hinkle went to work on the horror screenplay that they wanted to make. And originally it was going to be an updated version of Hansel and Gretel. Do you remember Hansel and Gretel though, Matt? Like,
is that the movie with Jeremy Renner, like that Hansel and Gretel?
So, I mean, it's a Brothers Grimm tale, like from. It's
why am I talking about? No, okay, I know the tale. I don't know why I started thinking about a movie that was made like 40 years after this movie. First of all, I don't know. Like, I've had half a beer, so I don't really know where my brain started to go there. Yeah, I know the tale of Hansel and Gretel. Yes, of course.
Yes. Okay. So it's interesting because I looked it up real quick just to get an idea. I'm like, they have this thought of Hansel and Gretel, and I feel like that story does kind of inform this a little bit more, because the story of Hansel and Gretel is like they are siblings who are abandoned in a forest and they fall into the hands of a witch who lives in a bread and cake and sugar house basically. And the witch she basically has cannibalistic intentions too. She's trying to fatten up Hansel to eat him. So, and then obviously Gretel is the one who saves her brother by pushing the witch into her own oven, killing her, and escaping with the witch's treasure. So it's like this Germanic story, but those elements are definitely in this story too. Like, obviously you stumble upon a house that's foreign, that's not, you know, it's not something that's a part of your environment. It's different. It's out there, and there's cannibalistic intentions in that house. So, so the bones of it are definitely there. Like, I kind of say this is a little bit informed by that, right?
Yeah, no, I would definitely agree. And then like there's something too about just middle of nowhere houses. I don't know why at the same time that kind of like capture your curiosity. You know, as you're kind of watching this, you're like, why would they ever go there? And then at the same time, you're like, you know, maybe I don't know, something about it captures me. But you're 100% right. It's kind of out there and it's just perfect. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And so Hooper and Henkel, they had this idea, and they also researched serial killers, which is interesting because the term serial killers wasn't even coined at this point too. Serial killers was coined around this time, but it wasn't really in the pop culture lexicon like it is now. It certainly was becoming, like, you know, you ever seen the show Mindhunter? That's like all about that. I love that show, by the way. It's a travesty that got canceled. But anyways, I digress.
All the best shows do, man.
I know, right, dude? It's such a good one. Anyways, so yeah, like they were doing some research on that. One of the ones they most notably were researching was Ed Gein, and obviously very, very famous serial killer who, you know, again had, I think he was like, he had lampshades of people in his house. He used skin like that. He had I think he also dug up his dead mother. So multiple films in the horror genre have been influenced by him as a serial killer. This is one of them. Matt, do you know the other two that are influenced by this serial killer?
Why do I feel like they got to be clown related? I feel like almost, right? Or Buffalo Bill, Silence of the Lambs.
Yeah, there you go. That's one of them. Yep.
I don't know what the other one would be. Shoot.
It comes out before this one.
Comes out before this one? Oh man, I don't actually know. That's a good
Psycho.
Point. Oh, really? Huh.
Yep.
Okay.
I remember the mother.
Not have guessed that one. That makes sense now. That makes sense because they are like a family. Yeah. Okay. Now that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, exactly. And you see that, and obviously they carry that the mother being dug up, or the rotting corpse of the mother, into this film too as well. So
yeah,
like the matriarch of the family, I guess. So yeah, that was sort of like the bulk of their research that they carried into this. Um, Warren Scarron is credited for coming up with the name of the film, actually, and it's like a perfect name for an exploitation film too, because they had a few other names they were thinking about just calling it Leatherface. Which, correct me if I'm wrong, did they not do a sequel called Leatherface?
There is one out there called
Yeah.
Leatherface. There definitely is. Yes, I know. I knew that one because it sounded so familiar. But yeah, there definitely is.
Yeah, there definitely is. So the film, obviously an independent film produced outside of Hollywood and more specifically in Texas. Hooper and Henkel struggled to secure funding for this project, but they eventually found it through a variety of different people. So one of them would actually be a former Texas legislature, an attorney, and even an alleged marijuana smuggler who helped finance. Yeah, this film was dirty. There's a lot of crime around this film, but the budget for the film ended up being about 100,000 in cash and 40,000 deferred. So very cheaply made. And principal photography began July 15th, 1973. The shot was a little over a month long. Obviously, because they filmed this during the summertime, they actually used the cameras from University of Texas Austin since school wasn't in session. However, that was a benefit to them being able to use that equipment. But because this is the summertime and this is Texas, almost every day was 95, 100 degrees, even some days hitting 110 degrees. So there's stories of actors putting cold beer cans on themselves to cool them off, especially during like the van scene and everything. You got to think in that cramped van with a few people. Dude, it's got to be hot as shit.
Yeah, well, like every day was like 110 degrees. They were filming for 30 days. And like the actor for Leatherface was in that mask for 30 days straight. Like they couldn't even wash their clothes because they're afraid like the laundry would get lost somehow. And so they didn't even wash like the laundry or anything like that, which is just as like gross when you think about it. So they wore that and they were like, yeah, by the end of filming, our clothes were pretty much rock solid from all like the fake blood and all the things that they had. And it's just so like, it might have been the longest month of these people's lives.
Oh yeah. It's funny because I read in my research, like when they talk about it now, they talk about it like as if it was going to war, like it was going to Vietnam, basically.
Yeah.
and for a bunch of actors, for a bunch of actors at this time, like, yeah, it probably was like that. So, and I can imagine like they talk about just the smell and everything because everybody's sweating.
Like 110 degrees, middle of summer, Texas.
Yep.
And this is before global warming really kicked off, folks.
I know. I mean, it was there. It's just like, it wasn't as bad.
Yeah. Like, oh my God.
Yeah, it's brutal. So yeah. And the filming and the production was like 16-hour days for 3 weeks. So it was gross.
You weren't just doing like a few hours and then like that was it. No, you were out there.
Yeah, this isn't like a Clint Eastwood directed film where it's like, all right, everybody's out, lunch at 12, we're done at 2:00, one take, and everybody's done. So yeah, it's an independent film with like some up and comers. So, they're going to need a bunch of shots and everything. They're going to need to do it efficiently, but yeah, there's no union mandated breaks and stuff like that either.
No, not at all.
Man. So Gunnar Hansen, who was cast as Leatherface, he basically got the part immediately as soon as he met Hooper, because he was such an imposing figure at like over 300 pounds. And you can see he's a very imposing figure. For the Leatherface mask, Bob Burns, who I mentioned before, the art director, he wanted it to be the right translucency and consistency as human skin. And from what I can tell, they did a pretty good job. So they came up with a combination of fiberglass insulation and latex. Again, Matt, like you said, Gunnar Hansen's in this effect the whole time. Good God, with its latex and fiberglass insulation.
How is he not dead? My biggest question is, how is he not dead? Because I get heat stroke if it's like 68 degrees, okay? Let alone being in full outfit for, especially with a mask on like that. if you put the mask on, I'm going to like have a panic attack. Cause at a certain point, you're just so overheated that you're like, I can't breathe.
Yeah.
And so the fact that like this guy literally, and then the fact that not even that, but like these people didn't really get paid because they had to sue to get their money essentially at a certain point after everything was said and done. So I would have been pissed. I would have gone real Leatherface and just killed everybody, first of all.
Well, there's a reason why they didn't get paid, and we're going to get to that eventually when we talk about distribution and who they got to distribute the film, because there's some shady stuff about that.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, it's just it's one of those where it boggles my mind that like everybody did that. Everybody was an up and comer, and they were just, you know, when you're doing it for the experience and the credits, you know,
right.
Similar to like Halloween, where it's a very low budget film and multiple people have different jobs on the set. That's what they're doing. But yeah, people got screwed out of this because obviously the franchise was much bigger than anybody thought it would be. You know, they thought it was just going to be a B exploitation movie for drive-ins, and that's it. It's big.
This movie grossed massive amount of money.
Yeah, it did, especially for the time. And then when we look at adjusted for inflation, it's still a good amount to this day. So with some exceptions though, with the filming of this, most of it was shot handheld. DOP Daniel Pearl, who didn't have much knowledge around lighting, and that kind of plays to the benefits of this film because it gives it that documentary feel. You know, when it's overlit or something like that, it almost draws attention to it, and it looks better. But you know, that can make it feel more like it's filmed in a studio, or you know, it's just that there's more attention to the visuals of it, which makes it look better again, but it doesn't give it that authenticity feel to it.
Right.
So that aesthetic was like mainly just due, like I said, again, to inexperience and lack of budget. So they only had about 3 or 4 like lights. So it wasn't like they were working with much. And the guy,
not at all.
The guy who was lighting it had not really much experience. So, but yeah, man. And then when you look at the film too, most films are not shot in sequential order. This happened to be one of them because of the way the budget would have like made it best for the film to be shot in sequential order. So, you know, when you're messing up like the door to the house and everything, like those scenes, you know, there's got to be some of the last scenes they shot. But actually the scenes in the truck were the last scenes they shot. So,
right.
Which is pretty cool.
Yeah. There's something cool about like it being shot sequentially. I don't know why, like something about that to me, just because it's hard to do. Like, it's just hard to film, which again, when you're thinking, it's like, wouldn't it be easier to film sequentially? But no, because you got to work with different, you know, locations and whatnot. And so it's impressive.
Yeah. Location, schedule, what you need to do with the set, everything like that. So yeah, they do it in a timing fashion that makes it like what's going to be the cheapest way to do it. And
yeah,
it just so happens that this was the cheapest way to do it. So it's rare.
Yeah.
It's rare. It's a rare thing. Like you don't see
it. Really is.
Mm-hmm. So, despite it being a low budget production, it was primarily a pretty safe shoot for the most part, except that one night where everyone ate pop brownies and Gunnar Hansen didn't know that what the secret ingredient was and had a couple of 2 or 3 brownies, and the brownies actually kicked in for the scene where Leatherface is chasing Sally up the stairs. So that's where the brownies kicked in for him.
Mix that in with the fact that, like, you know, it's already 100 and something degrees inside the house, and you've got flies swarming everywhere because of the fact that, like, it's so hot. The food is rotted too, and just oh
God, just it's putrid. That's what it would be.
It's so bad to think about.
Also, if like I had those pop brownies and I was tripping balls, like that would scare the shit out of me. Like just being part of that.
If you wouldn't be scared, like you're lying, because I know for a fact I would be terrified.
My anxiety would be through the roof,
without a doubt.
Oh, definitely. All right, so for the home decor, which I think is like one of the things that just adds to the creepiness in this movie more than anything else. The bones were in the film were real. The girlfriend of a friend in dental school sent over the teeth for them to use too.
Oh,
And they got animal carcasses from a landfill outside of Austin, and they used formaldehyde, obviously, to preserve some of the carcasses. So when you see like the armadillo and stuff like that at the beginning, like of course it's an already dead animal that they use for formaldehyde to preserve it and everything like that. So, I mean, Marilyn Burns, who plays Sally in this film, became a vegetarian for years after the film.
Dude, I don't blame her.
I said this last night. I'm like, when we were watching, I'm like, it makes me want to be one too. And,
I would almost consider it too.
Yeah. And then Guillermo del Toro also became a total vegetarian for 4 years after seeing the film. So, Hooper, when they finished production, everything like that, and they finished filming, they're going into editing, sending things into the MPAA. He was trying to actually go for a PG rating in this. And yeah, it's interesting. Obviously, you do that because you can get more money, obviously, than a rating for R.
Sure.
But I almost wonder, I'm like, that was probably worth it for them to have an R rating. You know, you come up with a title like the Texas Chain Saw Massacre and it's rated PG. I'd feel fucking robbed. I'm like, then this is bullshit.
Imagine taking your kids to that and hey, this is a good PG film, man. It can't be that. Why does it say massacre in it? I don't know. Let's go see it still. And then you get there and you're like, oh God, get Timothy out of this now. What have we done?
Exactly. Yeah. But also like, I would just not believe it. I'd be like, oh, it's just rated PG. How massacre could it be? But
that's not very massacre-y.
Yeah, right. So one of the things he kept doing to the MPAA, he kept calling them and asking them like what he could do to get a PG rating while hanging somebody up with a meat hook. So it's just like, dude, you ain't gonna get it.
I don't know about all that, bud. Hey, so just off of curiosity, what's gonna get us banned if we put somebody on a meat hook? And they're probably just like, wait, you're serious?
Look, we're not gonna show penetration of the hook. We're just we're gonna have them implied.
There's just hanging around, okay?
There's some light cannibalism in there too. I mean,
nothing crazy.
We're not going to show them chopping up the bodies. We're just going to imply it.
Exactly. It's about the implication.
I'm so glad you were going for the It's Always Sunny, because that's what I was going for too.
It's the implication.
It's the implication. So the worst part of the shoot by far was the dinner table scene.
Oh, yeah.
Which was shot in 26 grueling hours. Obviously, that's according to the people who survived it and filmed it. The reason why they did this straight in 26 hours is because the guy who played grandpa character, the actor was much younger, so they used makeup instead of casting somebody who was older. And he went through all that, and it took a long time, and they were just like, he's like, I'm not doing this again. We're doing this in one session. So they did that, but they also, because of this, had to film it during the day sessions too. So they're filming indoors with all the lights, the makeup, everything like that.
I'll be honest with you. I didn't realize that was makeup on him. I just automatically kind of assumed that it was like a mask because of how it looked.
Yes, it definitely feels like it could be a mask. I mean,
it does. Like the makeup isn't bad. Don't get me wrong, but it definitely looks like a mask. Just like it kind of has that rubbery mask texture look to it.
Yep, it does. It does. It's not like, it's not the best makeup, but then again, it's got a budget of 100,000, so I'm not expecting it to be. Definitely not like our first film that had great makeup effects and great aging makeup effects in The Exorcist when we talked about that.
Yeah. Good point.
They did had some good ones. Anyways, so between that, the BO, the rotting chicken bones, and the heat, it smelled something awful during that shoot, and it's obviously 100 degrees inside. But the film was released, like I mentioned before, October 1st, 1974 in Austin. It ended up being a surprise hit, and especially in as an exploitation film. So two studios were interested, or two distributors were interested in it. None of the big studios. There was AIP and Bryanston were interested in the film. Bryanston, the company, was owned by brothers Joseph and Louis, aka Butchie. Pereno, who allegedly were connected to the Colombo crime family.
See,
So,
I did not know that. That is
very
interesting to me.
very interesting. And so another excerpt I had from the book that I found all this info in. So this is something interesting. Billy Kelly, a special agent for the FBI who went after gangsters working in porno, recalled that when he taught police recruits, he'd ask them how many had seen the Texas Chain Saw Massacre. After 75% of the classroom raised their hands, he'd say, "Congratulations, you sent $2.5 million of your money to the Colombo family in Fort Lauderdale."
Damn.
Yeah.
I mean, okay, but they didn't come. Okay. I guess it could be worse.
Yeah. I mean, well, when we talk about why people didn't get paid, that's why people didn't get paid, because the mob was getting paid. That's a good
point. Yeah, the mob. I mean, you got to pay the mob first, man. Okay, yeah, like the mob's getting their money first. All right.
When they own the company, they're getting their money. That's for sure.
Absolutely.
So yeah, Bryanston was the one who distributed the film, and they actually, believe it or not, Matt, they came up with the idea of having the film have that based on a true story thing to it. Oh. So it was more of a marketing aspect too, but I think they tied both of those in together where it has sort of that feel to it, and almost making a political statement, like you said before.
Well, I mean, that's how you're going to get an audience. I mean, even look at now, Terrifier 3 is coming out. Everybody kind of knows about it at this point from the first two Terrifiers. And apparently there's reports of people leaving the theater so disgusted and throwing up. But really what it is they had people come to the theater and say hey, come see a screening of some like holiday film or something like that, because it's it takes place around Christmas. They didn't tell them exactly what movie it is that they're going to see. So when they got there, to their surprise, boom, it's Terrifier 3, and people aren't into that style of movie. It's a very gruesome, especially this one. Trigger warning that apparently they kill a child in this film, and so people got there. This isn't the movie that they were expecting to come and see. So they left. And as they're leaving, there's people there with like iPhone cameras and stuff, like shoving it in their face, trying to get reactions out of them, and made people uncomfortable. And so now there you go. There's your marketing ploy. People are leaving this movie X, Y, and Z for this reason. And it's, that's all people are going to see is the headline. They're not going to look any further than the headline. So when you see based on our true story, like I was talking to Lauren this morning, I was like, oh, I'm watching this movie. She's like, I've never seen this, because it's based on a true story. I can't watch that movie. And I was like, see, they got you right here. You're the reason, because it's actually not a true story at all. They marketed like that smartly to get people like her to watch it or not watch it. You know what I'm saying? Or people in seats nonetheless.
Well, I was just to say, I think the idea was to get people to watch it, not watch it.
Well, that's what I mean. Like that, well, that's like in some cases it turned people not to watch it, but in a lot of cases people are like, "Oh, this is a true story. I have to watch it," because you have this morbid curiosity. I mean, I know I do. I can't help it. And so, like, yeah, exactly. Like you're gonna probably watch the film, and that's boom right there, asses in seats.
And you think like this obviously influenced something like that came later, like the Blair Witch Project, and found footage horror has become its own genre in and of itself. And it's just, this definitely, I mean, I think that genre owes a lot to this film and some other films like that, notably the other one's Cannibal Holocaust, which, that film is sort of shunned for different reasons. But yeah, it's one of those where it owes a lot, that subgenre owes a lot to this film because of like the marketing plays. I remember like a film like Blair Witch, like that was a big part of the marketing.
Everybody's saying, yeah, it's real. These people actually went to the woods and they're dead.
Yeah. Like, you felt like it was it's like, am I watching a snuff film right now? Like what's going on?
Exactly.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's really cool when you come up with like some sort of marketing ploy like that to make it that much better. So, hey, Bryanston Pictures, Colombo family owning that, whatever. Hey, it's a good job in the marketing of it as far as that goes.
Facts.
But whatever. For the box office, the film would go on to make over 20 million during its initial run. So pretty good returns there. Matt, do you have an idea of what that would be if we adjust that for inflation today?
1974. Gosh, I don't know. Let's say like 326 million.
Yeah, that's a little too much.
Oh, really? Wow. Yeah. Okay. 226 million.
You're about 100 million off.
Only 100 and something million?
Only 126. Yes.
I say only, right? Like only. No, but I guess for some reason to me it would have been a lot more. But no, that's interesting. Okay.
Hey, still pretty damn good for
For a
returns like that.
1974, film like this, yeah, I would say.
Yeah, I would agree. So they did well. I think it ended up making like 38 million on its like, it's after rentals and stuff like that too. So obviously with a film like that, it has like a small distribution company like Bryanston Pictures. Like
Right.
it's probably not going to capture as much as it possibly could. Probably could have gone for more if it wasn't for something like that. So yeah. Also, a little bit of a different format that we're doing this week, Matt. Let's get into some of the discussion points I want to have on this movie. Instead of doing the questions, we're going to do the questions still. Let's get into some discussion points. The gritty feel of it. How did you like that overall?
Personally, I like it because you're going. It's a grimy film, right? You're supposed to feel kind of grimy, just like they are. It all kind of takes place in a day, and it's the 70s. They're all cooped up in this van. It's hot. And then they're running through the dirt. They're running. They're sweaty. There's blood. There's probably bugs. I mean, you're kind of supposed to feel it puts you in the mindset that they're kind of in, and kind of gives you that more spooky feeling in a way.
Yeah, it does. It's gritty, and it's like, it has almost this, they've talked about it before, this documentary style of filmmaking. And so,
yeah,
like I've heard this term before too, and it's like a style in filmmaking. It's mostly for documentary filmmaking. It's called cinema verite, and it's obviously it's a French term, and it translates to truth cinema or truthful cinema. So it's like this documentary style it was developed by this guy named Edgar Morin and Jean Rauch. And so basically it combines this improvisation with the use of the camera to unveil truth or highlight subjects hidden behind reality too. And so when you look at some of like the styles that they do, like how when they're showing different things, throughout the movie, they have these like zoom ins on the characters that are very slow and deliberate. And they feel like they're from a documentary film, or they're doing the same thing. Like, remember when I think it was Pam's character, who, when she goes in after her boyfriend is captured by Leatherface, she goes to the house and she trips and falls into the living room and then you're finding all that stuff. You get like her perspective a lot of the time.
Yep.
And it's just like, it's these close-up reveals that feel just very documentary style to them. And that's where it is, like where it gets its gritty style from, is that verite. It's almost giving this truthfulness to it, because the camera is sort of just there to capture what's there and not really there.
You feel like you're looking on something real and almost private. Exactly.
And it's just, it's most times, like we get a static camera, and, a good filmmaker isn't going to call attention to it, but we know that everything is carefully placed. Actors are carefully placed.
Right.
But in this one, it just felt like the camera's there to capture whatever's in the room and look at that. It almost felt like a newsroom footage.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah. It was really creepy at that part of it. I do love like the beginning part of it, where we get that sound effect, that camera sound effect, and it's just showing the body parts.
Yeah.
It really sets the mood as far as a gritty movie goes.
It does, because it looks like you're looking at real police footage that they released, that, however you make that camera noise, and then the narrator in 1974, and then the narrator has that deep, serious tone to their voice too, with the Star Wars like crawl opening,
Yeah. It's totally what influenced George Lucas.
I was going to say, George, did you take some inspirations from a movie you just failed to mention? He's like, this is fucking awesome. How do I make this into a part of my movies? I got it.
Well, I mean, it all comes full circle because the term serial killers is coined, or part of it is actually derives from serial adventure films. So filmmaking always had this influence in serials, you know.
You're
So,
right.
and
He
then
was
obviously
also,
Star Wars is influenced by serials. So,
well, I also got to say, I think the holiday special was actually influenced by some horror films.
which ones in particular are we talking about?
Gosh, I don't know. Think of anything with creepy, hairy people running around. I don't know. I think Texas Chainsaw Massacre could be a good one with those terrifying masks.
Yeah, could be.
We've seen Chewbacca's family. Terrifying.
Oh man. Yeah, I think the gritty, like verite style though is just it's really what elevates the movie, and it does. I will say it does hinder the movie at points, but like it wouldn't feel as creepy if it wasn't there. So even despite some of the limited hindrances it has, it's just so crucial to, and it's something that I feel like horror movies today are missing severely. Like, I don't get me wrong. I think that big budgeted and studio horror films can be great. I mean, look at like The Conjuring, obviously, like really good. But there's horror is at its best when it is made to feel real, and that's where my opinion is like that's where this style of filmmaking does best.
Absolutely agree. Just for I think what they do best when they're set up to feel real due to the fact that it adds a layer of unsettling to it. And that's what you come to see horror movies generally for. Like when you're seeing a horror movie, I want it to feel somewhat unsettling and creepy. And so when you add that layer to it, I'm going to walk out of that theater. It's going to stick with you a lot longer than, for example, I'm going to be honest with you. I watched The Strangers Chapter 1 today. And now I'm comparing this because the very first Strangers that ever came out, that film was unsettling due to the lack of music. And there was something unsettling about these people just messing around. But for some reason, the newest one that just came out just didn't do it for me. I didn't leave feeling like I did with that first one, where just you walk out of the theater thinking about it. And that's what this movie kind of does versus, I don't leave the theater deeply unsettled thinking about, Freddy Krueger, for example, because he's a sillier character almost.
At least in like the later ones for sure. And
oh yeah,
we'll table our Freddy Krueger discussion for our next episode. Bitch. Scary Terry. Love it. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't I get what you're saying, because when it's lacking that. It's funny you say The Strangers too. Another you just reminded me, another film that plays on the myth of it being based on a true story as well. They kind of do something similar. But great film. I think we watched it back when I lived in Florida with you too.
We did. Yes.
Yeah. And
they've had a couple of them out, and the first one still is like the most like creepy one for that fact.
Yep, it definitely is. It's it has a lot of the conventions of a slasher film. Yeah, but it's like a home invasion film, and it's very creepy, and the way they shoot that is very, it just gives that so much more style to it. But the other thing I think that, I want to talk about too, that just gives it way more of an authentic feel to it, other than like the camera, is have you ever heard of the term mise en scene? I'm giving you a lot of French today, buddy.
No, I don't believe I actually have.
Okay. So it's a film term, and it's used for both film and stage. It really is morely a stage term. It's basically mise en scene is the arrangement of scenery and stage properties in a play. And it's a French term. It's setting the stage. But in film analysis, the term mise en scene refers to everything in front of the camera, including the set design, the lighting, the actors. And that includes all these different things as far as sets, props, lighting, costumes, actor blocking, shot composition. This is what really is elevating the film, is everything that is in this camera and that is shown in the camera here. It just elevates the film. When we talk about the props that they use real human bones too. They use real human teeth. They're using all these animal bones and stuff like that too. They actually are able to make furniture out of it. And when you're putting that into the scene, you're shooting on location. And despite what you may think, like, you think that your mind can recognize when something's in a set or in a stage versus a home. You kind of know when it's really shot on location, I should say. And
Right.
this is definitely one of them. So it's like when you have that real location in the mise en scene and the lighting is not overly lit, it's more documentary, and the setting and the place, it elevates it. The mise en scene in this is like really, I think, what elevates the film to the top. I mean, that's really what
I would agree with that. Now that I'm cultured.
Yes. We're going to film school today, Matt. So
we are, and I'm feeling it. I'm cultured. I'm there. I'm in it.
You think you're cultured now? Wait till we get into some of the academic writings that we're going to talk about too. So, this film, like I had mentioned before, it's pretty famous for some of like the academic research behind it, obviously film theory and all that. So one of the cool books that I actually bought and I own too, it's called, and it's not just on this movie, but it's on horror in general. It's called Men, Women, and Chainsaws by Carol Clover.
Straight to the point. I like it.
Love it. I've revisited it a few times, but you think of some of like the things that this film is trying to say. So one of them is like the idea of the displaced slaughterhouse workers. So, we don't know that what the name of the family is in this film, but if we were to look at the I guess like the franchise, they end up being called the Sawyer family. So for sake, so we're on the same page, the Sawyer family, they talk about it. They're all displaced slaughterhouse workers. They used to kill the cattle. They have the expertise in killing cattle, but their jobs are taken away from, obviously,
they took our jobs.
They took our jobs. They're machines that took their jobs, obviously, that killed the cattle now, as opposed to using a sledgehammer before. And they talk about it with Grandpa. Oh, he was the best. Like, he used to do it all the time. And then obviously Leatherface, that's part of what he does too.
Yeah.
And the hitchhiker as well. Same thing. So they all do that stuff. And it's making a conscious choice to say like, hey, the displacement of the worker, because of automation and machinery. And this is sort of what they do is they take their skills and their expertise and hone it in on people and feed off people. And it's obviously it's making a political statement about that, or somewhat of a statement about that too.
Yeah, definitely. I would agree.
So yeah, like, I don't know. What do you think about that? Like the displaced, like, obviously almost like an unskilled labor worker, like that's displaced from a job because of automation and everything like that. It's definitely trying to say something about that.
Oh, it definitely is. And it can drive people to some, dark place, especially in a place like rural Texas. I mean, you're even seeing it in modern day, right? Like the usage of AI and things. But when you go to these more rural areas, it can really bring out the savage. I mean, look at how close we are to societal collapse as it is, when people who are just dumb think that because there's ports closing, they have to go hoard toilet paper that's even made in America, right? I mean, it could lead people to do some really stupid shit. And so when you look at displaced workers who are in the slaughterhouse, like it could, who are already maybe on the edge of, just cognitivity. Yeah. I mean, that's a really good take on it.
Yeah. And what they're doing, it's interesting. What they're doing is like, their barbecue that they're selling. Remember, it's on like a road stand, so it's for travelers passing by too. It's not like they're selling it to locals or anything like that. It's for people who are passing by. So they're selling it back to like sort of the passerbys of society. So like the youth.
Nobody thinks twice about them.
That neglect them. Yeah, exactly. And they're almost feeding they're feeding basically those people back to themselves, because they're obviously taking those people and killing them and putting them into their meat. And then feeding
Yeah.
it back to them. It's fucked up when you start to think about it like
I
that.
mean, yeah.
Yeah, man.
It's really fucking, it is. I mean, God, it's so creepy too. It adds another like creepy, like, what the hell?
Yeah, totally. And yeah, so like when they talk about it in this film, or I mean this book, I find it one of the more interesting things that it was talking about. So and another thing is that like this film, or I mean this book also looks a lot at the tropes of serial killers or that come about in the slasher films, the killers themselves. So there's always sort of this like psychosexual fury that propels them to be killers too. It's not as much in this one, I would say. There are points though. I mean, when you do look at somebody like Leatherface, though, it's like there's sort of this disintegration of the nuclear family going on there. Like you look at the family, there's no real matriarch. She's dead. There's like bones. But Leatherface later on in the film, especially in the dinner scene, he's donning this female mask, and he has like this female grandma mask and stuff like that, and is like doing sort of these high pitched noises. Leatherface.
Yeah, he's like squealing almost.
Yeah, and it's really unsettling. But I'd say so. Like, there's sort of this, this thing with the nuclear family going on there. There's just some like weird thing with the mother that's like it's there. It doesn't. It's there on the surface,
Not
but it
in
doesn't.
your face.
Yeah, it doesn't go into it as much. Maybe as like a Psycho, where it's like Norman Bates is dressing up as his mother. Like there's something weird there, or even Halloween that dives in a little bit more into the sexual part of it with his sister. So there's something, but I like that it's right there. And then there's also that key moment in the dinner scene where Sally gives like that implication that I'll do anything. And obviously it has it's implied sexually, right? Like I'm not the only one.
When she's like, I'll
right?
do anything. Like, yeah, I mean, it definitely is. I would say for sure.
But they just laugh at her. So like, she's completely misread what the situation is. Like, no, there's nothing you could do to get out of it. There's some other psychosexual thing going on with these people that is not explainable. Like, and they're here to fucking eat people. So,
yeah. I mean, there's nothing you could say or do at this point. They're going to just kind of do what they do.
Yeah, exactly. All right, cool. Let's move on to the questions. I got a few of these. So, let's just dive into it. Is this the scariest film ever made?
I think it would honestly probably be in the top 3. I would say top 3. So The Exorcist is one that sits unsettling with you. I'm not putting this in my top 5, but I just want to like to say that when I was younger and watched this movie for the first time and I lived in the woods of Massachusetts, I would at night run to my house from my friend's house after watching it. And that was Jeepers Creepers, the first one. They get progressive. Yeah. Like the second one's goofy. The first one though, like there's something unsettling about that movie too. But it creeps me out as a kid, but it's not like a scariest movie of all time. I would definitely say like The Exorcist is for, the demonic possession portion of it. And then honestly, like I would put this right there because it isn't a true story, but it's absolutely something that why couldn't it be real? Why could this not be real? And it's something primal. I think it hits on a primal part of our fears, I think is why. And so I would put that in there. Like it didn't scare me, but it unsettles you. And that's what you want in a horror film. And a lot of the films that you think of as horror films, I can't really think of things that like unsettle you without they need the help of like torture porn almost, which I don't really consider to be scary.
No, neither do I. And like the torture porn aspect of it, it's just, yeah, it's again, sometimes like a film like this, where it's the Texas Chain Saw Massacre, less is more. We're filling in the gaps with our human brain because we know that a chainsaw is going to rip somebody to shreds. We don't need to necessarily see it. The only time we actually see it in the film is like when Leatherface drops the chainsaw after getting hit with the wrench and cuts his leg.
Cuts his own leg. Yeah, which is very interesting, right? That, I mean, we even get the shot of poor Frederick. I don't think we really talked about him enough, which we're going to have to in a second. because you hated on him, but I feel bad for him. But anyways, he gets it bluntly, right? He's poor dude's in a wheelchair.
You mean Franklin?
Franklin. Sorry, I said Frederick. You're right. Franklin. Poor Franklin. He gets it bluntly, man. Dude ain't running away. Everybody else has the chance to run away. Franklin ain't wheeling through no woods, prairie, nothing. He gets it straight into the chest, and you don't see it. You kind of can think and imagine what it is. Kirk, when the chainsaw, and after they put, up on the meat hook, he's laying there. We kind of can fill in there, but the chainsaw and how it cuts his leg, and you get that scream. Yeah, that's really the first and only really kind of scene where you see something get gashed by the murder weapon.
That's it. That's the only other time you see maybe a hammer hit hit Kirk or something like that. So that's it.
Did you touch on the fact that when they're making the dad suck Sally's finger, that was legitimately her blood?
No, I didn't talk about
that. So
here's
something too unsettling. So this adds to the unsettling. Like they were filming because there was supposed to be a tube that shoots blood out. The tube was messed up. So after a while, for some reason, they're like, just act, something happened where he actually cut her finger, and that was her real blood that he sucked on. And Sally was so deranged from filming at this point. And, the actor who's the grandpa didn't know it was actually her blood either for the longest time. Neither one knew that she was actually cut and that was her real blood. So when they're sitting there sucking the blood out of her finger for so long, they legitimately got the shot of that, her being cut. That's real. And then him sucking her blood. That's her actual blood.
Jesus. That just adds another layer of creepiness. Exactly. So there was actual cannibalism going on in the movie.
Legitimately, legit. That was all real. And the actors themselves didn't know, but Hooper did.
Right. Fucked up. And they it's so funny when you think about the line, doesn't he say he references Dracula at some point during the film?
Mm-hmm. I think so. Yeah,
he does. I think it's Franklin who references Dracula during the film. I know.
He got it so bad. The dude was in a wheelchair. He was screwed from the start. All right. The guy never had a chance.
He didn't have a chance, but he could have been less annoying. I'll say that. So
also, yes.
I don't know how many raspberries in one film I can take, All right, so when you're talking about your scariest films, you've got Texas Chainsaw, you've also got The Exorcist, and then you said Jeepers Creepers, or no, yeah. that wasn't one of them.
But, I don't really know because none of the other big ones really frightened me. I guess none of them really. I guess first time viewing Blair Witch could be up there before. I'm thinking back to when I first watched these films. Now, obviously, none of them really scare me, but I'm just thinking about as a younger viewer when I first watched these films, what the impact was they had on me. So obviously Exorcist and this movie belong there. Maybe Blair Witch before I found out none of it is real. I could put that in there, but zombie movies aren't scary. Scream's not really scary to me. Halloween, they kind of made him too supernatural. Same with, Jason and Freddy was something that really scared me. So none of these really terrified me, I guess. Maybe Cujo for the fact that dogs with rabies is a real thing. I don't know.
It's definitely a real thing.
Kathy Bates chopping my foot off. That could be real. I don't know.
Oh, the hobbling scene. Yeah, that could be scary.
Misery. Yeah, that could be scary. I don't know. So I don't really know what my scariest movies of all time would be. So I'm interested to hear what you have to say.
So, it's up there for me. And when you look at what's scary in a film, you have to look at okay, everything from how it was shot, how it was made. What your feeling was. And I will say that here's the thing. I did visit this one later in life. So do scary movies have that effect on me as much as they did when I was younger? No, of course not.
Right.
It's just not the way it works anymore. I still do get scared sometimes with a jump scare, everything like that. This movie's not big on jump scares though. This is 1974. It's a little bit more of a slow burn. They're not going to have that many jump scares on it. So I would say, unfortunately, it wouldn't be. I would maybe put it in my top 10. But when I say it, it's still one of my favorite horror films ever made. It's just not one of the scariest. And that may be a little unfair just to do the timing of it. But, when I think of a film like Halloween, almost unfairly, I saw that when I was like 7 or 8 years old. So it scared the shit out of me for most of my childhood.
Yeah.
Not to mention my uncle would, get up in the Michael Myers mask. So walk around like the shape around my house. So yeah,
Right.
that was creepy. The Exorcist for sure, because I did see that like sort of, 14, 15 years old, where it was at a point in my adolescence where it's like, yeah, you like horror movies, but you still get scared as shit. Like, and when I saw that in the theaters, that movie affected me. Like, I had nightmares about that movie afterwards.
Absolutely fair. Yeah.
And then maybe, I want to say the movie that scared me most as an adult, and this is sort of like in my 20s, was actually The Conjuring.
Really? Okay.
It's this dude scared the shit out of me. And it was really one of those ones where it's like I watched it. We were in Florida at the time that we were living in the dorms, and I watched it by myself because I hadn't seen it yet. It was just one of those days where it's like, oh, I'll give it a shot. I was like, holy shit, this is a scary movie. And it's probably like the last time a movie ever really scared me. I've had movies unsettle me since then, this included, but like, I was like, holy shit, that's scary. And you know what? I'm looking at it now, like we talked about it, like two of these films were big budget studio films, and one of them was an independent film. So interesting to say that. It's like, yeah, sometimes maybe those what unnerves you may not scare you the most. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's so hard to pick, right? It's like when somebody asks you what's your favorite movie of all time, because there's so many different genres, and I even feel like there's so many different subgenres when it comes to horror movies, that it's really hard to pick like what's the scary, because they all have different things that make them great. Like you were just talking about, like the way they impact you in various ways, unsettling or jump scares or whatnot. So it's always, I feel like that is one of the hardest questions you could ever ask somebody, is favorite movies, scariest movies, funniest movies, etc.
Oh, totally. And I mean, yeah, that's the point though. This is what we are. We are the 60 minutes of movie podcast. We're asking the hard hitting questions. All right. So, yes. Almost as professional as those guys who went to journalist school and everything like that. Yes.
Listen, those nerds know nothing. All right.
They do not. Okay. So moving on though, I let's, instead of going to maybe a little bit of a broader subject, let's go a little bit more, a little bit more focused here. Is this one of the best low budget horror films?
See, again,
I would say emphatically yes with this one, but I think it probably is. But then again, you've got Halloween, Paranormal Activity, which was like,
that movie was good. I still like that movie.
Yeah. The Blair Witch, another one, $30,000 to do it. A Night of the Living Dead, very cheaply made movie, but like so effective. And then Evil Dead. Evil Dead's another
great one. Movie.
Oh. So, I mean,
it's hard, right? Because Halloween probably actually spawned modern slasher films, in my opinion. This movie might have set it up, like in a volleyball way, where it sets up for the spike. Blair Witch Project kind of was that found footage pioneer for horror. Night of the Living Dead is George Romero. Like this Night of the Living Dead, if you don't have Night of the Living Dead in George Romero, you don't have zombies. Like you don't have all of the zombie genre right there. And then Evil Dead is just so much freaking fun, dude. I love everything that's come out of the Evil Dead. Even the most recent Evil Dead movie to come out was great. The TV show Ash vs. Evil Dead was awesome. So I would say yes, in terms of doing the most with what they had to make me feel the most, I guess, unsettled. The other ones are just fun. I love Night of the Living Dead. I love Evil Dead. I love Halloween. I love those movies probably more than Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but I would say the Texas Chainsaw Massacre did the most with what they had, if that at all makes sense to anybody else besides my own brain.
Yeah. I mean, some of those on there, like you said, it's like, Evil Dead I do have a lot of fun with too. Though the second
so
one's better.
fun. Oh, yeah, I would go to you with that one. Yes, I will agree on that one.
Yeah, second one's better. But it just, I mean, I remember Halloween obviously didn't see in theaters when it came out because it came out 8 years before I was born.
I was like 20 years away from being born. Oh no, 79.
Yeah.
I guess I was 11 years. Sorry, but still.
Yeah, but still, it was like 8 years before I was born for that movie. But Paranormal Activity, I saw those ones. Blair Witch, I snuck into it when I was like 12 or 13. Oh yeah,
such a bad boy.
Yeah. Night of the Living Dead, though, another one I came to a little bit later in life. That was more of like I'd seen a Dawn of the Dead before I've seen Night of the Living Dead. So,
agreed. I absolutely came late to that one too. Yeah,
and so I was more, and I loved Dawn of the Dead. I thought it was that movie like had some little things that scared me, but I was like, it's almost like darkly comedic, that movie too. It's a satire.
Agreed.
I mean, yeah. So it's a little bit of a different film. But yeah, man, like so many of these are great. And it just goes to show you though, too, that with low budget, like you can make such great low budget horror films that can really.
Isn't that the thing right there? Isn't that the thing? Modern day Hollywood has seemed to have forgotten about. You can do a lot of really good things with less versus these bloated films that take $200 million to make, and they're just bloated messes.
Yep. 100%.
I can, but that's my dissertation right there. And that's neither here nor there.
Yeah. You're telling me on that. Okay. I'm going to ask this one now. Who is on your Mount Rushmore of slasher villains?
I mean, Michael Myers is right there, right? The guy's a tank. I was running through the woods yesterday and I was like running by a lake and I was like, oh, Jason could be around here. But I don't really have Jason on my Mount Rushmore. I'm not really intimidated by him because if I'm not really going to any campgrounds with lakes near them and spending time. So you're not going to beat me to death while I'm sleeping in the sleeping bag. Like that's not going to happen. So I don't really care. Freddy Krueger, you know what? I respect a man or whatever the fuck it is who talks a lot of shit. And Freddy Krueger talks so much shit. He makes it fun. So I got Freddy Krueger on there. Oh man, Ghostface. It's hard to put Ghostface. Okay. Ghostface from Scream 1. Ghostface plural.
So we're talking
Matthew Lillard. Yes. They would be on my Mount Rushmore because they were clever until they fumbled. So I would put those in my top 3. Leatherface would probably be 4 because also I'm not running around. Sorry, I'm just not going to rural Texas. Which is where you'd have to find Leatherface. Whereas Ghostface could be anybody, as Scream has taught us. Unless, good news for me, I'm not related to Nev Campbell. Or Billy, for that matter. So I'm good. Freddy Krueger can find me in my dreams, and he talks a lot of shit. Michael Myers, I guess, I'm safe because I'm not really related to Laurie Strode at all. But maybe I want to go on a weird romantic date on the back of a motorcycle with him. I don't know. But those would be my top 3 for slasher villains, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. I think that it almost becomes when you look at these lists, like you're going to have, I feel like at least probably 2, if not 3 of Michael, Freddy, and Jason up there.
Yeah.
Most people will, including myself. And then it really becomes down to what you're going to do with the 4 spot, Are you going to say Ghostface, which is like almost like, okay, Ghostface is a concept because there's multiple people in that franchise that play Ghostface,
Right.
So yeah, like you said, you're going to have to specify what Ghostface to, but I mean, then you could obviously look at Leatherface. You could look at Candyman, Chucky, if you wanted to go there.
No, fuck Chucky. I'm punting that little bastard and I'm You know what I'm doing with Chucky? I'm taking that little stupid doll and he's getting put in concrete and he's getting just stashed away forever. Sorry. Chucky, I hate Chucky.
Fair. But yeah, then you've obviously got Michael Myers, and Jason Voorhees and Freddy Krueger. You've got Leatherface. Candyman's a good one. I guess you could say Jigsaw. Art the Clown has certainly become like a more popular one of late.
Yeah. agreed. But
Norman Bates, though, if you want to go old school, and you've also got Pinhead from
I don't like the
Hellraiser.
Hellraiser films. I don't know why those movies are kind of lame to me too. So I think Hellraiser is stupid. First of all, I'm not messing around with a weird box. It's going to prick me in the finger. But
yeah, I mean that's fair. But yeah, I mean, right? It's like they kind of all asked for it in that one. Like just saying, they're
legitimately though, like if
box.
there's ever like a "You Deserved It" movie of horror, it's the people who fuck around with that box. But
I mean, it is kind of like, well, isn't it like kind of the point? Because like talk about like a psychosexual thing going on there, like the whole BDSM thing is like all over that.
I'm also not into that, so guess what? I'm safe. Sweet.
Oh, you can't convince me of that, leather daddy over here. Good God.
I'm the pinhead. You're my pincushion, baby.
Well, now you sound like a Freddy Krueger line right there. So,
bitch.
Oh, bitch.
Come here, bitch.
So yeah, I mean, I think for me, I'm gonna put Leatherface on my top 4.
Yeah, I mean, it's
even though
too, for sure.
Even though like I do like some other films better than Texas Chainsaw, it's, you know, it's not one of those where I'm like I can put that as an iconic villain up there ahead of him. So
right,
and that's really
and I think too with, you know, Leatherface is like there's a realism to Leatherface. You know, I fully like he could be real. He's got brute strength, you know, but he's not immortal. I think what makes him it's like Ghostface, right? It's like Ghostface takes hits, but still gets the job done till he doesn't. Leatherface never outright gets killed. Leatherface takes hits, takes, you know, chainsaws to the leg, whatever it might be, but still comes back. So I think that's what makes these villains even stronger, because at a certain point, you know, obviously Freddy's a supernatural character. Michael and Jason both transcend into that supernatural factor. Whereas I think like Ghostface and Leatherface are both too mortal. They're mortal. And you know, the things that they do while they're mortal kind of make them like better in that regard. They don't have to rely on things. They take hits, they get hurt, they die if you're the Ghostface. So I think that's what makes them really good slasher villains right there, is the mortality aspect.
I agree. It's different when you have that like vulnerability, that mortality to them.
Yeah,
it feels more real and more authentic. So
yeah,
100%. And that's what we talked about. Like when you're thinking about what this movie's going for and what it is, it's honest with its authenticity and portrayal of authenticity. So yeah, and if everything's in service of that, then it needs to be. So, and including the character, it can't be supernatural. So agree 100%, man. All right. Does this movie make the best case of any movie for not eating meat? I
mean, yeah, I guess
it might. I mean, outside of any like random PETA movie or something like that. But
yeah, I mean, in terms of, yeah, I would say, yeah, that's fair.
Yeah,
it's got an argument.
It is. It's got a good argument. All right, cool. So critical reception and awards and recognition. So this has a score on 91 on Metacritic and 83% on Rotten Tomatoes.
It's pretty good.
And when we're looking here, I've got a little excerpt from my book here. So, and it's basically just talking about, it's Dan O'Bannon, who was the screenwriter for Alien, talking about this instead of a critic. So he's like, I noticed that with Night of the Living Dead and Texas Chainsaw Massacre, these films were crudely made, and they were clearly not made by any established studio, but by a bunch of guys somewhere. Right away, that gave you the feeling that there were no civilized restraints on the people making this film. If they follow that by slapping you in the face with some horror that you've never seen before, then you're completely disarmed, because now you're convinced that these people making this movie are psychos and they'll show you anything. And I thought that was very spot on for this movie.
Yeah. Yeah. I would say it is.
Some good insight by Dan. All right, cool, man. Ready for the categories?
Let's do it.
Let's do it. Best scene. All right. So I've got 3. I think the film gets into gear when you get Kirk and Pam, like they meet their demise. Like we really get introduced to Leatherface. Like that whole
Yeah.
scene, just they get to the house and then Kirk goes in there and he stumbles and it's just that creepy shot and he gets hit over the head with the sledgehammer and he's flopping on the ground. You know what I love about that too? They sort of foreshadow it when they're talking about the killing of the cattle earlier and they say like, oh, sometimes you have to hit him multiple times. Yeah, like that's exactly what happens. So yeah, I think that one's so it's perfect. It's so creepy too. And
Yeah.
just
it is.
food around it. Next one I got is the scene where Franklin gets killed into the Sally chase scene. So the only bone I have to pick with this scene is like,
it's Franklin.
The only bone I got to pick with this scene is that it's and again, this is like one of the film's strengths, but also one of its weaknesses is the lack of lighting makes it a little too dark as far as like a night scene goes.
I was thinking that too.
It's a little too hard to follow.
I do wish that's the one scene I do wish they showed a little bit more. Like you don't have to go like all sorts of crazy with it, but you could have shown like maybe bits and pieces or like a little bit of blood coming out because he's straight getting chainsawed to the chest and stomach and stuff, man. You probably could have showed, you probably have all that rotting food if you didn't shoot sequentially. Like you could have just thrown ripped up meat elsewhere, you know?
Yeah, no, right.
there could have been something they could have done. I just feel like.
Yeah, there could have been a little bit more. And I think even more just to like maybe not too much lighting, but a little bit more so that, hey, we could actually see what was going on. There gotta be something.
Because it was like the last death really of the movie too. If you kind of think about it, nobody else kind of dies after that point.
Yeah.
So being the last death.
No, it's not the last death. Remember, the hitchhiker gets run over by the truck too. So.
Oh, yeah. I did forget that. You're right. I did forget. That was a funny scene. You're right. But I mean, as far as the friend group goes, like now it's got some impact because now Sally is by herself.
Right.
It really truly leaves her in this isolated feeling. So I feel like they could have done a little bit more with that.
Yeah, they could have. Okay, and then the last scene that I have for best scene is the dinner scene, obviously.
That's the best scene. To me, like it's no competition, it's the dinner scene because there's something unsettling. I mean, it's an unsettling sequence of events, right? And then they're holding her and they keep giving the grandpa the hammer to try to hit her in the head. He only gets really one shot in, right? She gets away, and that's kind of like, at that point, you're like, wow, this is really messed up. Like really messed up.
The whole family dynamic, and they're mocking her. They're mocking her terror, and like Leatherface gets really creepy. He like comes up kind of close to her, like almost like looks into her like this. It's so unsettling what he's doing.
Yeah.
And then like I love like sort of the real close-up shots of her eyeball and stuff like that. It's like something that you think like, well, why is this here? But it really just fucking creeps me out. So
it's primal. It's a very primal scene too. Like there's not a lot else going on other than like, it's just primal to it in the whole sequence where like it starts with the sucking of the finger, like we've already talked about, which is really disgusting. The hitchhiker's holding her head over a bucket to bash her brains in. The grandpa's there. They're all like laughing. They've got their fucked up looking teeth. They're all like, you know what I'm saying? Like it's a primal sequence. It's a house full of men holding this poor girl against her will. And it's like very unsettling. And then it just adds to it when you learn about the producing of that scene. But even taking that part away from it, to me, that is the scene that whole sequence of events sticks with me more than anybody else in this movie.
Yep. Same here. That was always the creepiest scene for me. Okay. Quotable line. I've got only one, and it's not even really a quotable line, but it's the narration at the beginning.
The film which you are about to see is an account of the tragedy which befell a group of 5 youths, in particular, Sally Hardesty and her invalid brother, Franklin. It is all the more tragic in that they were young. But had they lived very, very long lives, they could not have expected, nor would they have wished to see as much of the mad and macabre as they were to see that day. For them, an idyllic summer afternoon drive became a nightmare. The events of that day were to lead to the discovery of one of the most bizarre crimes in the annals of American history, the Texas Chain Saw Massacre.
There's no real lines that stick out with me other than the opening Star Wars crawl.
Yep, that's it. That's really it.
Literally.
I think anything else. We just said for best scene, but for memeable moment too. Dinner table scene again is definitely the most memeable moment too.
The whole like getting kicked out of the van and he's like,
when he gets kicked out of the van.
I feel like that one would be pretty great. He's just like wacky, wild, inflatable arms and sticking his tongue out and all that kind of stuff. Like that could be one too.
Or maybe that when they're talking about astrology and Saturn being in retrograde, what they were saying.
Yeah, I mean.
Anyways, for what aged the best, I've got like 4 things. One which I just mentioned, astrology. Guess what?
They chicks were into it these days.
No, chicks were into it in 1974, and they were into it now. It is aged beautifully. People still love their astrology.
You know what astrology loves is it gets older and the chicks stay the same age.
I mean, yeah, it kind of does. Hey, another Texas guy there. I see what you did.
You're right.
Another Texas movie. Yeah, man, that's it is one of those things where I picked up on the astrology scene. They're talking about like Saturn in retrograde, and I was like, I always thought Mercury in retrograde was the bad one, but I know nothing about astrology, so I just brushed it aside.
I don't know anything either.
I think it was just a good thing to say that something bad's happening, but whatever. All right. The other thing, visuals. The visuals are like what makes this film so creepy.
Yeah.
More than anything. So how it's shot, the aesthetic, that's really, I think, what makes it so creepy. So I've got that as what aged the best. Leatherface as a character. It's just the look of the character. Oh my God. Like it's still so unsettling. Like the way he looks.
Yeah, true.
Oh, one of like the most iconic looks in all of film history and definitely in horror movie history. And then the last one that I talked about, our new favorite French word, mise en scene. So the mise en scene, I would say, is like the other one that I think is one of the other ones that age the best, just because like that's everything, like I said, we talked about as far as props, the set, the actors, how it's shot. It's everything that's in front of the camera that makes it creepy, and it's in service of what makes this film so creepy. So that's what I'd say for that. But do you have anything else, Matt, that you want to add in there, or is that?
No, I would pretty much say those. Like, I think the way that it's shot in the visuals with like the practicality to it probably ages the best. Because if you watch this 50 years on, it's still as good as, when it first came out, and it holds up, better than a lot of the other, like a lot of CGI effects that we get in films, like fake blood and stuff in modern day films, like look garbage. Whereas this, there's not like blood, a little bit, some real, but I would say like the visuals probably are the part for me that hold up the best.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, everything as far as the visuals, the mise en scene, the look of Leatherface, I think holds up pretty good. But if I'm going to go with one, I'd say, it's the visuals. I think the way the film is shot is really what sets it apart from any other just horror film or low budget horror film. So, all right. And what is the worst? Honestly,
one clear cut thing for this one.
The performances aren't great. Okay. It's a low budget film. Like that's it for me.
Dude, I was going to say the treatment of everybody on this film.
Yeah.
If this film went through that today, there would be people getting sued. There might be jail. Like there was no protecting the actors and actresses or unions or any of that. So not like half the shit that they did filming this would not be good to go today. So I would definitely say like the treatment of just everybody in general on this film.
Yep. I can't disagree with that. Yeah. From a film standpoint, what's on screen, I'm going to go with the performances, but if we're going off screen, then yes, how people were treated during this. So
yeah,
I would agree.
Fair.
All right. Standout performance. I've got one.
There's one.
It's Gunner.
Yeah. I was going to say there's only one. It's him.
my boy Gunner's Leatherface, and it's not like he's doing much, but with the character, like he doesn't need to do a ton, but everything he's doing
His
in this
on-screen presence is imposing.
It's so perfect, and like the little things he does, the noises that add to it, and like the creepiness, like when they're at the dinner table scene, he's just coming up looking creepily at Sally's character.
That slow hunched over walk kind of thing that he does.
Yeah, exactly. And then like the whole chainsaw dance at the end. It's just chef's kiss. I'm not going to include anything in pound for pound in this one, just because
everybody got kind of equal screen time, I feel like.
Yeah, and it's the performances aren't that great, to be honest. So, all right, who gets an Oscar? I mean, it's got to be Tobe Hooper, right?
Yeah, yeah, I would go with that because he tied it all together and made it work with what they had. So I could go with that.
Yeah. At least that's what I'm going for. Is
I can agree with that.
My boy Tobe Hooper. So, all right. Trying to think if anything else we got here too
in this either.
Music moments.
I guess like the beginning, kind of like slow with the camera noise to the the slow reel. Like sure, I guess that would be really the only music moment you get in this that kind of stands out to you. There's not really any music moments either.
Yeah, there's not.
And horror doesn't tend to have music moments, which is completely fair.
I would say like the score at the beginning is very creepy. Like, and they played a couple times
it sets the stage.
film, but that's it. That's really it. All right, double feature. What are we double featuring this with? I've got two options, and I've mentioned them already, and they obviously have a tie-in with this because they were both inspired by Ed Gein as a serial killer.
Yeah.
So I think Psycho or Silence of the Lambs works pretty well as a double feature with this.
I would probably honestly say those two as well. Just for the fact that they're kind of similar films, right? You got the cannibalism with Silence of the Lambs, and it's kind of like an unsettling, slow burn thriller. Whereas Psycho is kind of the same. It's a unsettling, slow burn of a not really slasher at that point yet, but kind of.
No.
And also is like Psycho takes a turn as well when you think about it, like what we believe to be the main actress of the film, she dies pretty early on. I love that aspect to it as well. And that's what makes it, kind of iconic. And Texas Chain Saw is another iconic film. Both films kind of push the genre forward in their own respective ways. So I would 100% agree.
Yep. I think those two, if you're going to say one over the other, you got a choice between them.
Psycho, easily.
Yeah. Part of me wants to go with that too. Is Psycho. Not to say that Silence of the Lambs isn't great, and I love that movie, but
right.
Is something a little bit different about Psycho that I like a little bit better. So, who wins the day?
Ooh. I almost want to say like the character of Leatherface. I almost want to say the character of Leatherface for how iconic he's become. I mean, if you go to like any sort of haunted house, like if you grew up in Massachusetts like we did, you got Witches Woods, right? I'm going to use this as an example because there was a hayride and any real honest to God, actually, if you go to any haunted house, haunted woods, haunted corn maze, you're probably going to experience somebody with a chainsaw that has similar vibes to Leatherface.
100%.
So I would honestly say the character of Leatherface, they created somebody that's truly iconic in the horror genre before we really got the icons of today. And I think they even overlook Leatherface for people like Michael Myers and Jason. Honestly, I think he's somebody that gets overlooked too much. So I want to personally say Leatherface, the character himself.
I like it. And I would agree. Leatherface does get overlooked as far as like the big slashers. We always think about the big three, but Leatherface came before all of them. So
sometimes it's not bad to come first.
Yeah. I see what you did there, sir. Yeah. So, I mean, Tobe Hooper is another one who I think like wins the day because he obviously wrote and directed this film and produced it. Yeah. So, Hey, the mob certainly made out. I think the
The
mob
mob
won
made their money. I think the mob, yeah.
their $2+ million that they made.
Yeah.
Yeah, they made a good chunk of change. So I don't know. I'm gonna go with my director boy Toby Hooper and say he won the day with this because
That's good.
his second
Yeah.
film out of the gate, kind of like John Carpenter, one of their second films out of the gate, and they
Yeah.
make this amazing film that pushes the genre forward in ways that we didn't think about, and has had an impact on horror and cinema history throughout this day.
Yeah, I would fully agree. Those are two very, very good ones. If you had to choose like realism, versus not that Leatherface isn't real, but still.
No, he's based on somebody who's real, and certainly the
That's true.
marketing in the movie would have you think he's real. So
Yeah, also true.
all right, Letterboxd score. You want to go first this time?
You know what? I will. I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to say that I'm going to go 4 out of 5, just for a couple of reasons. I think that they could have shown a little bit more in terms of the killing. I feel like they shied away for whatever reason. I feel like they could have gotten a little, I get the budget, all that kind of stuff. Sure. But I feel like that they could have found ways to kind of show us a little, especially when it comes to like the lighting scene of Franklin getting, murdered and stuff like that. So that kind of prevents it from being a full out 5 on 5 or 5 out of 5, I should say. And then there's just a couple minor things here and there, like the performances and things of like that nature that really keep it a full point from being 5 out of 5 for me.
Yeah, I'm in a similar boat. So it's funny you say that though, because like I feel like, definitely the performances for me, I actually appreciate them not showing too much blood. So like, to me, that's a plus on it because again, it allows us to throw in our imagination, which can be much scarier sometimes.
Right. Agreed. But still at the same time, I still want a little, give me a little bit more.
Yeah.
They're
Just
getting massacred. Give me that.
So that's fair. I think for me, I also want to, like I said, I'll give it a 4 out of 5 as well. I think it's more the performances that hold it back a little bit. And I also think, some of the lighting, like I said, in that Franklin, or I mean, when Franklin gets killed in the Sally chase scene, like it could have been you could have kept the authenticity there and it could have been better.
You could have.
Like it could have been better. So I think that's where it misses out. Like, is it in that 5-star category that I might have some other horror movies? No, but I still love this movie and it's still very unnerving and
it is
very creepy. So yeah, that's it, man. Any final thoughts on Texas Chainsaw?
Not overly. No, it's a very disturbing film. It's not the best film ever. It's disturbing, but it holds up today, which is very hard to do, especially for a 1970s horror film. I think it holds up better than like the sequential films that come with it. In my opinion, I think it's the best one that they have made of the entire thing. But it's a good movie, man. That's all I got to say. For Halloween, if you're looking for something that's not bloody, not gory, but it's still going to give you that uneasy feeling that you want from the Halloween season, that this is the movie that you should check out if you've not done it before.
100%. It should be on your spooky season watch list. Yes. Throw it on there. Throw it on the rotation. It should be there. Well, that does it. That does it for this episode. Before we go into the trailer of the next movie, Matt, where can people find you on socials?
Man, the easiest way to find me is just Hops Geek News. That's the easiest way you're going to get a hold of me on any social media platform. I guess my own personal is Matthew Tyler with 2 R's because I'm special like that. On Instagram is probably the most easiest way you're going to get me on my personal ones. And then I just want to say, like, if you do find me on there, depending when this airs, raising money for the hurricane relief effort, got $700 raised so far. So if you want to donate, going to be getting supplies to bring down there. So do that. You can find me on the socials anywhere there.
Yeah, certainly. I know, Matt, you're close by towards North Carolina and everything like that. So I know I was devastated by Hurricane Helene. So want to make sure we get the plug for that so that people can donate and help out as well. So for me, you can follow me on The Real Buffs on Instagram. My personal one is Sir_Charles_Mac on Instagram. Other places, The Real Buffs on Threads as well. Same thing. It's going to be at The Real Buffs. Yep. So at The Real Buffs on Twitter. That's mainly where you can find us. And then for Letterboxd, you can find The Real Buffs as well. And I'll have the main list of our ratings as far as every movie that we've done so far on this podcast. Also wanted to plug that we are putting together the 2025 schedule. And if you want,
Jesus,
yes, if you want to have a movie done, we're going to leave it up to you guys. If you want this done, there's only a couple movies that I have scheduled so far, set in stone for next year.
Quack.
Yep. We already got our first commission. And we're going to be doing the Mighty Ducks. And actually we're going to be doing both D1 and D2. So I will say that, but any other movies that you want commissioned next year, reach out to me via any of the socials that I just mentioned, or you can reach out to the email that we have for the show, which is hosts@realbuffspod.com. And so that's another way you can reach out to me with the movie. It's only $50 to commission a movie. And also if you send me an email on why you want us to do that movie, I'll talk about it during the episode when we dive into why we're doing this film. So another way you can just choose to engage with us is actually help collaborate and do our schedule for next year. And I will say this, like, I'm pretty much open for anything, just as long as it's not on the docket. And I'll tell you this right now, there's one specific movie on the docket for next year that we're going to do in July. And it's because it's also celebrating its 50th anniversary. And yeah, we'll talk about it then. So that's it. But on behalf of The Real Buffs, I am your host, Charlie.
I am Leather Daddy Matt.
All right, Leather Daddy. And yeah, we've got a good movie coming up for the next episode and for spooky season. So for that, I will just say,
hit the trailer.
Get some good sleep, peeps.
The kids of Elm Street don't know it yet, but something is coming to get them.
There's something out there, isn't there?
You could just see cuts happening.
What did that, Lieutenant?
I don't know.
What's the coroner got to say? He's in the jar and puking since he saw it.
They're gonna kill me for sure.
Did you do it?
There was somebody else there.
He was locked in a room with a girl who went in alive and came out in a rubber bag.
No one knows where it came from or who it will visit next.
Nancy? There's something wrong with you. You're imagining things.
Nightmare on Elm Street.
Do you believe in the boogeyman?
No.
Whatever you do, don't fall asleep.
No!
She's the only one who can stop it. If she fails,
I'm your boyfriend now, Nancy.
no one will survive. From Wes Craven, director of The Hills Have Eyes and Last House on the Left, a new masterpiece in fantasy terror, Nightmare on Elm Street.